Conseller d'Economia i Coneixement de la Generalitat de Catalunya, president de l'Acadèmia Europea, vicepresident de l'Acadèmia Europea, directora de la Barcelona Knowledge Hub, senyor Thomas Pogge, senyora Mara Dierssen, senyor Joan Domènech Ros, president de l'Institut d'Estudis Catalans, tinent d'alcalde, regidores, regidors, autoritats, amigues i amics, bona tarda, benvinguts, good evening, welcome. As Mayor of Barcelona, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today at the open ceremony of the Barcelona Knowledge Hub, the Southern European Mediterranean Office of the Academia Europea. We celebrate it with a very important event, the first Disputatio of the 21st century, entitled Social and State-of-the-Art Medicine. I am honored to welcome you to this magnificent Gothic-style chamber built in the 14th century called Saló de Cent, the Saló of the 100. It is the place where the first government in Barcelona, the Consell de Cent, or Council of the 100, used to meet. And nowadays is the place where we celebrate the most important events of the Barcelona City Council. I am most grateful to the Academia Europea and its chairman, Professor Lars Wallou, for having chosen Barcelona to locate this office. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to the Minister Mas-Colell for his involvement in this process. Barcelona wants to be a city of culture, knowledge, creativity, innovation, and well-being. And surely the Barcelona Knowledge Hub will contribute to the international projection of the city. I am convinced that this initiative will go on and lead the new joint projects between different scientific disciplines. It is a privilege to welcome today Professors Mara Dierssen and Thomas Pogge. I would greatly appreciate your involvement and participation in this Disputatio, reminiscent of the one that took place 750 years ago in Barcelona, one of the most important Disputatios of medieval Europe, an event presided over the King Jaume I, James I, which consisted of a debate to decide which was the true faith, Christianity or Judaism. It is clear that circumstances have changed since medieval times. Unlike the Disputation of the 13th century, today there will not be a winner and a loser, and I am sure that the debate will not be closed. Professor Lars Wallou, President of the Academia Europea, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mayor, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to be present here during the official opening of the Academia Europea Barcelona Knowledge Hub and listen to the Disputatio, which is arranged to celebrate this event. The first academies of science in European countries were established during the Renaissance and many more during the Enlightenment in the 18th century. The first academies had two functions. They were meeting places for scientists and scholars to present and discuss their findings, especially controversial findings, and they were bodies that tried to influence the rulers and later governments to increase the support of research activity. With some modifications, the academies today have the same two main functions. Academia Europea was established about 25 years ago on the initiative of the European Commission at that time. The basic idea was that Europe needed an academy as part of the hopefully growing civic society in Europe. When I became president of Academia Europea 5 years ago, it became evident to me and to my board that the recruitment of new members had slowed down and that the activity of the academy was low and mostly occurred in the northwestern parts of Europe. So we have established two regional offices, or hubs, in addition to the main office in London. One last year in Wrocław in Poland, with special responsibility for the Eastern European region, and now the Knowledge Hub here in Barcelona, with special responsibility not only for Catalonia or even Spain, but for the whole Southern European and Mediterranean region, going from Portugal in the west to the Middle East, and an area which is even bigger than the area controlled by the Kingdom of Aragon during the early 14th century. In modern times, most research disciplines have their own subject-specific international bodies or associations for collaboration. The main function of the academies today is to promote transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary scientific activity, in many instances going across the borders between natural sciences, the social sciences, and the humanity. So will also the Barcelona Hub has as one of its main activities, I hope. I also hope that the Barcelona Knowledge Hub will seek collaboration with other international research organizations in Southern Europe, such as the United Nations University, which has a hub here in Barcelona. Academia Europaea has recently established a young academy. It's largely an independent organization, but may need some help from its parent organization, perhaps from the Academia Europaea Secretariat here in Barcelona. I would like to end this short introduction by thanking the local people who are responsible for the establishment of the hub. I don't know all the people, but I know two whom I assume have played a major role, especially Professor Andrea Mascolel, who is member of the Academia Europaea board, and Enric Banda. I know both of them for their time in important European research organizations in Brussels and in Strasbourg, respectively. Now I'm looking forward to listen to the Disputatio. Thank you.
Professor Genoveva Martí, Academic Director of the Barcelona Knowledge Hub. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening and welcome to the second Barcelona Disputatio, 750 years later. Our Disputatio will certainly be very different from the first one. For one thing, ours is being live broadcasted. There are other differences though. In the old Disputatio, the two wise men debated from opposite poles about a topic. We instead have a wise man and a wise woman, who, rather than debating from opposite poles, will try to illuminate different aspects of an important issue. In the pursuit of truth, tolerance and collaboration are often more conducive to progress, so our Disputatio will perhaps be a collaboratio. Before I introduce the speakers, let me just tell you a bit about the structure of the event. The two speakers will make their presentations. In the meantime, if there's anything that you would like to ask them, you have a card and a pencil. If you're missing the card of the pencil or the pencil, don't worry, because there will be people distributing them. You can write your questions and you can pass them to the people that will be collecting them. And I will try to consolidate the questions into topics, into main topics, so as to avoid repetitions, and then I will pose them to the speakers for a debate. And now, without further ado, let me introduce our disputantes, and I will do it in reverse order. Our second speaker is Professor Mara Dierssen. She holds a PhD in neurobiology from the University of Cantabria. She's group leader at the Center for Genomic Regulation. She's also president of the Spanish Neuroscience Society, member of the Governing Council of the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies, and committee member of the International Society of Neuroscience. She has held professorships at different universities and has authored more than 120 publications in peer-reviewed scientific journals. Dierssen has received also a number of awards, including the National Culture Award for Science, the Laura Iglesias Award for Women in Science, the Cisle Lejeune Award, and the Ramon Trias Fargas and Jaime Blanco Award for Down syndrome research, among others. She's editor of several scientific journals, Genes, Brain and Behavior, Frontiers in Neuroscience, and senior editor of Down Syndrome Research and Practice. Her work is devoted to understanding the genetic basis of complex brain disorders, with the aim of finding new cures that help the cognitive alterations and social inclusion of intellectual disabled patients. To this end, she has spearheaded different projects with patient associations. Our first speaker is Professor Thomas Pogge, Harvard PhD, Leitner Professor of Philosophy and International Affairs, and Director of the Global Justice Program at Yale University. He is a member of the Norwegian Academy of Science, as well as President of Incentives for Global Health, a team effort toward developing a complement to the pharmaceutical patent regime that would improve access to advanced medicines for the poor worldwide. He's also president of Academics Stand Against Poverty, ASAP, an international network aiming to enhance the impact of scholars, teachers, and students on global poverty. And by the way, let me take the opportunity to announce that tomorrow morning, Professor Pogge will participate in the launching of ASAP in Spain. This is an event that is entirely independent of the Academia Europea, but you're invited to attend. Promises to be very interesting. It will take place in the Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Professor Pogge has published extensively, and among his recent publications we can cite the books Politics as Usual, World Poverty and Human Rights, John Rawls, His Life and Theory of Justice, and Freedom from Poverty as a Human Right. Let us welcome Professor Pogge.
Human progress has two interlinked components. On the one hand, innovation, the creation, invention, and discovery of new knowledge. On the other hand, diffusion, dissemination, or uptake. Insofar as either of these two components is stifled, humanity's progress is impeded. We have learned that the speed and quality of innovation can be substantially raised by granting innovators temporary monopolies, patents or copyrights, for example, that enable them to profit by charging high markups. But such temporary monopolies facilitate innovation at the expense of diffusion. So the better we innovate or incentivize innovation, the more we pay a price in terms of the diffusion of those same innovations. Nowhere is that more serious than in the area of medicines or pharmaceuticals. At present, pharmaceutical innovation is rewarded through product patents of minimally 20-year duration, which were mandated by the World Trade Organization since its founding in the middle 1990s. Under their trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights agreement, or the TRIPS agreement. The TRIPS agreement requires all WTO member states to introduce these 20-year product patents. And just to give you a sense of how a difference it makes, think of India before TRIPS came into effect there. India had 7-year process patents, which allowed pharmaceutical innovators to protect a particular way of making a medicine, but they could not protect the molecule as such. And so generic companies were able to invent around the patent and to then make cheap copies of these patented medicines for the benefit of patients in India and across the world. Now, the system that we now have has 3 important disadvantages. The first one is that it impedes universal access. During the time that a product is under patent, poor people cannot afford to buy it because the profit-maximizing monopoly price tends to be 50 times or even 100 times higher than the cost of production. Medicines are cheap to produce once you have production established. The additional unit is very cheap, but they get sold at a very high price because innovators want to take full advantage of their temporary monopoly. You can see that here, income inequality in the world is so high that the profit-maximizing price for a pharmaceutical innovator is a very high price. It makes sense to sell so that the top 15% of the human population can buy the product. It is not worth reducing the price down to the level where more people can buy it, because innovators lose more money on the smaller markup than they gain by having more customers. The second problem with the present system is that it does poorly in regard to targeting. Innovation is naturally focused on those diseases and medicines where innovators can make the most money. They can make the most money with diseases that rich people or affluent people have, or well-insured people. Innovators cannot make much money with even very important diseases that are concentrated among the world's poor. And so research and development of new medicines is focused for that reason away from the large diseases of the poor, such as malaria, tuberculosis, schistosomiasis, leishmaniasis, and so on. The third problem is that the present system is also quite inefficient, and that's actually a nice problem to have, because it makes it possible to look for moral solutions that can also be supported for prudential reasons. The present system is very wasteful, and you can see that from the fact that a large majority of the money that the world spends on medicine, about $1 trillion every year, a large majority of that money does not go back into the manufacture of medicine or the research and development of new medicines. Most of that money actually goes for litigation, for advertising, and other wasteful activities that do not really benefit either patients or even the pharmaceutical innovators and industry. Now, the solution that we are working on involves the creation of the Health Impact Fund. The Health Impact Fund would be a complement to the existing TRIPS regime, and it would offer innovators the opportunity voluntarily to register any new medicine that they invent for so-called health impact rewards. These rewards would be paid annually out of fixed reward pools that the Health Impact Fund would establish, something in the order of maybe $6 billion per year. And these annual pools would be divided up among the registered products in proportion to the health impact that each of these products achieves. So we would measure for all registered products the impact, the health gains that they produce in the world, and we would then divide the reward pool each year according to the health gains of each product. So we would establish a second track on which innovators can be rewarded. They're free to stay with the existing system and get rewarded through high markups that they can charge protected by a patent, or they could give up that reward opportunity, agree to sell their product at cost, and then be rewarded on the basis of the health gains. And here, of course, different products would choose different tracks. So a product that is mainly directed at rich people, for example, a hair loss product, with little health gain would stay on the patent track, whereas a product that addresses a need of poor people, like a malaria product, would naturally choose the Health Impact Fund track and be rewarded according to health impact and sold everywhere at a low price determined by cost. Now, registrants would be free to keep their intellectual property rights, but they would be required to give up the usual markup reward. They would be required to sell the product at the lowest feasible average cost of manufacture and distribution. This price ceiling would be determined by a tender where alternative manufacturers could offer to produce the drug, and the lowest cost, reliable manufacturer would be chosen, would deliver the medicine to the innovator, and the innovator would then sell it on to wholesalers and retailers. We have, as you can see, a distinguished advisory board of Nobel Prize winners and politicians who are helping us and have helped us in gaining political traction of the idea and also to develop its details further. And we can, I think, with this health impact fund idea, solve the three big problems of the status quo. First of all, we solve the problem of high prices insofar as all health impact fund registered products would be available from the first day at low prices. So poor people would gain access, and in some cases, innovators would have incentive to sell the product even below cost in those cases where, by serving additional patients, the health gains that they would be rewarded for would be larger than the extra cost of selling below cost. Second, the Health Impact Fund would provide powerful targeting incentives to focus on the diseases of the poor, which often create a great deal of damage but are now under-researched and neglected. In regard to these diseases, research companies in the developing world would be at less of a disadvantage than with regard to diseases like cancer and diabetes, because these diseases have not yet been researched very thoroughly, and here research companies in the developing world have patients readily available on which to try out their new treatments. The Health Impact Fund would also boost cost effectiveness. It would reduce costs and losses due to patenting. You would not need to patent your medicine in many jurisdictions because nobody will want to compete with you if you sell the product at a very low price. There would be much less litigation, much less need for competitive marketing. There would also be no incentives for counterfeiting because the actual product would be available at very low prices. And gaming and lobbying would also be much reduced, as would be, of course, the enormous deadweight losses that are now costing an additional $220 billion per year in lost sales that would be profitable to the innovator. As a bonus, also for rich populations, the Health Impact Fund would focus the attention of innovators on the health of patients, because only if you actually promote the health of patients do you make money. Under the present system, innovators have every incentive to sell you a medicine at a very high price, regardless of whether that medicine promotes your health or not. Under the Health Impact Fund system, innovators would have incentives to go after only those patients who can benefit from the medicine, to make sure that the medicine is in good condition, to make sure that it is affordable, that it is carefully prescribed, and that patients take the medicine to optimal effect. All these incentives are welcome to patients regardless of their economic position. We would fund the Health Impact Fund through governments that are willing to participate in the scheme, each of them contributing something like 0.03% of their gross national income. They could invest that through long maturity bonds or perpetual bonds with interest pegged to inflation or to GNP per capita. Alternatively, one could fund the Health Impact Fund through an international tax, such as the financial transaction tax that is now much debated, or a tax on pollution. Ultimately, what we hope to do is to create an endowment, a large piece of money that would be invested and from which these annual reward pools could be funded. The endowment would be nice because it could also accept donations from international and non-governmental organizations, foundations, corporations, individuals, and so on, and would thereby give each of us an opportunity personally to contribute to the long-term betterment of the health of human beings. We had two pieces of good news this year. We have, on the one hand, received 2 million euros from the European Union towards piloting the Health Impact Fund, and we've also had a $2 million commitment from a large pharmaceutical company, Johnson & Johnson, which has developed the first new anti-tuberculosis drug in 50 years, a very important drug called bedaquiline, or Ceturo in the brand name. That drug is already FDA approved by the Food and Drug Administration of the United States, but it is still waiting for approval in India. As soon as we get the Indian approval, we will start the pilot in Mumbai. The Health Impact Fund, to summarize, would benefit all stakeholders. It would benefit innovators who would reap moral and reputational gains, large new markets, and new research and development opportunities. It would benefit patients by achieving a larger, broader arsenal of medical interventions available at better prices, and through that strong focus on promoting the health of patients rather than merely selling to patients. And it would also benefit governments and taxpayers by greatly improving the efficiency of healthcare. By relying more on medicines, we need to then rely less on hospitals, on intensive care units, and we would have less disease in the population, less economic cost involved with disease. Now, the same idea that works really well in pharmaceuticals also has other applications, which I want to briefly introduce. One concerns food production. In food production as well, we face the same dilemma between innovation and access. We have learned that by stimulating innovation in the area of food, we can produce ever better nutrition, ever more efficiency, at greater nutrient yields per acre, less use of pesticide and fertilizer, and so on. But this progress has been incentivized in the wrong way. It has again been incentivized by allowing innovators to claim a patent, which then allows them to charge licensing fees or sell products at very high prices. And that, of course, hampers, again, the diffusion of these innovations. These innovations do not spread. Now, the solution is analogous to the solution in the case of medicines. We should give agricultural innovators the option to agree to the cost-free use of their innovation in exchange for payments from public funds that are based on the measured total impact of their innovation in terms of nutrients, in terms of reducing emissions such as methane, for example, pesticides, fertilizer, use of antibiotics. So we could define as a society what we think are the socially valuable contributions in innovation makes, and we could then reward each of these innovations according to the social value that it adds. And that social value, of course, would be proportional to how many people use that innovation. So we would turn these incentives on their head. Rather than give innovators an incentive to charge high prices, we would give them an incentive to make sure that their innovation is very widely used, even by poor populations. The same, again, could work in terms of environmental innovation. Here, too, innovation is extremely important. It allows us to produce electricity and other goods at much lower cost to the environment. And once again, we are doing the wrong thing by rewarding these innovations in the way of giving innovators the right to charge high prices, giving them a temporary monopoly. This is stupid because, again, the pollution that is produced by using old, antiquated technologies is pollution that we all have to contend with. We all breathe the foul air. We all have to contend with the polluted water and natural environment. And again, it would be much better to give innovators the option, at least, to be rewarded for their innovations on the basis of the environmental impact that the innovation actually achieves, on condition that they make this innovation available for free. Now, rewarding innovation in the wrong way in these areas of medicine, food production, and environmental innovations has especially grave effects on the poor. The poor fall ill more often, more severely, they die earlier, they suffer hunger and malnutrition, and they also suffer more from the effects of climate change, as we just saw in the Philippines with the typhoon. And so the wrong way of incentivizing innovation perpetuates poverty. Poverty, in turn, is a key driver of human population growth. You can see here that the total fertility rate, the average number of children per woman, is 4.53 for the least developed countries, and it's only 1.66 for the more developed regions, and 2.41 for the remaining middle-income countries. We already have 95 countries that have reached TFRs below 2 and are already no longer growing, forward going. So despite their vastly higher mortality, poor populations have very rapid population growth. You see here how population growth has decreased very rapidly in countries that have eradicated poverty and remains very high in countries like Niger, where poverty continues. Also, when you look at the ranking of countries by total fertility rates, you can see that all the top countries with high fertility are in Africa. And as I said, more than 100 countries, or about 100 countries, are now below 2. Now, fertility is the main factor, of course, for what the human population will be like in the year 2100. Currently, the United Nations estimates that that number can be anywhere between 6 billion and 16 billion. And of course, it would be much better for ecological reasons if the population of the world were closer to 6 billion in 2100 than to 16 billion. The best way of achieving that is to fight poverty, and one good way to fight poverty is to change the way in which we reward innovation in the areas of medicine, environmental innovations, and agricultural innovations. Thank you.
Professor Dierssen, the floor is yours.
Sorry, this. Good evening. It is my privilege to acknowledge today the presence of the Mayor of the City of Barcelona, Professor Mascolell, members of the Academia Europea, Professor Pogge, my opponent in this Disputatio, dignitaries and the audience that has gathered here today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the vast impact that the proposal of Professor Pogge will have on our views of innovation, of public health, and the impact of these new views into the global marketplace. However, I am a scientist, and thus I always inquire. And this is why my title comes with a question mark, because what I would address is the issues that we have to consider in this proposal. So let me ask by you the same statement that Professor Pogge did. We have as motors of the human progress, innovation, and the problem that very elegantly Professor Pogge has stated is how this innovation is translated into the general benefit. Let me go back for a second and ask first, what do we consider innovation in drug discovery? And innovative products can be defined as those which cure a disease or a condition, or prevent them, reduce mortality or morbidity, reduce the cost of the care, improve the quality of life, are safer or easier to use, or improve patient compliance and persistence. And if we take into account this definition, what we see is that during many years there has been a reduction in the number of new molecular entities or biological license applications that have been approved. And on top of that, the investment in discovery has increased during all these years. So the cost of creating a new drug has really increased to a point that Francis Collins, the director of the National Institutes of Health, was describing as an horrendous failure. In fact, if we compare the number of new drugs approved per dollar spent, it has been extremely reduced. And the money invested is not then translated into a sharp increase in the new therapies based on science. So why is this? Partly because of the process of approving a drug is extremely long. It can take from 10 to 15 years, and it's calculated that it's costing an average of $1.3 billion. If we take into account, if we think that one new effective drug could save kind of 10,000 lives, if we lose 10 years for approving this drug, we are probably losing 100,000 people before it's legal. Another problem that can also be account for the huge investment without success is the fact that the failures come normally at the very end of the process. And in some drugs, for example, the drugs devoted to the central nervous system, this is extremely important because it elevates the cost very much, and it makes the process extremely costly. Not only that, once we have a success therapy, the market is full of people competing for selling this drug. And this is what I call too many cooks spoiling the broth. So, in fact, the spending in promotional activities that Professor Pogge also targeted in his presentation is extremely high. And take a look, for example, in the number of sales representatives. That was increased in the state 3 times more than the number of clinicians, meaning that instead of receiving 1 visit per week, you were receiving kind of 3 or 4 visits per week. One of the problems is probably what was highlighted in The Economist this January. The title was, "Has the Ideas Machine Broken Down?" And the argument was that the entrepreneurs were not leading discoveries that were fundamentally new. And they were simply profiting the knowledge that came from the academia, from the public-funded research. And in fact, the public-funded research is driving a completely new field and a completely new landscape of medicine. And the knowledge that we are acquiring are changing dramatically our way of targeting disease. So, simply as some examples of how we are changing this landscape, I may mention genomic medicine, the ENCODE project that told us about the importance of the non-coding DNA in our health and in our way of seeing nature, synthetic biology that is creating new life. It's creating new life from chemicals. Or the robots that will probably be helping us in the near future. Let's take a look at these discoveries. Genomic medicine has provided a lot of information about genomic substantial factors in disease. And this has pointed to new targets that have been extremely helpful in some of these disorders. Moreover, we have been able to drive this knowledge into the physiopathology of disease. So in some cases, we already know how these genotypes are provoking these disorders. This is also driving a very important change in how we perceive medicine, because there is this revolution with personalized genomic and direct-to-consumer genomic services. So in kind of very few hours, you can have your genotype sent to your mobile phone, and you can share it with your friends in Facebook and see if they like it. And here you have some examples. So you can buy the access to your Ancestry edition, and you can see how similar you are to your mother or your father. You can also see where do you come from. Or you can check what is the risk for having some diseases. Of course, this is opening also an ethical debate that we can then later address. But what is important is that this is driving a new way of curing people, of addressing this medical model. So what is proposed is a customization healthcare with decisions and practices tailored to you, to each of you. And this is based, of course, of the use of genetics, but as you will see, should also be based on other factors. And what happens is that for a single patient group with the same diagnosis and the same prescription, you can have people that do not respond, you can have people that respond, you can have people that have increased toxicity. And this is a very important problem, and we will be able to tailor the drug prescription based on this information. Another important discovery that is driving and will drive a change in productivity is the capability of creating living organisms from inert chemicals. And this has been already done and published. And Craig Venter, that was one of the boosters of this initiative, says that this is an important step both scientifically and philosophically. And we have to think about what will happen with this new living organism. They can be used, for example, for producing new drugs, for boosting new fuels, or whatever else we want. Other ways of changing our healthcare system. We can profit of computer science also. And nowadays, we already have brain-computer interface and body-computer interfaces that are helping disabled people to be more independent. And we are helping to their health, but also to their social inclusion, reducing the cost of dependency. And this is very important for many types of disability. But one of the most important, in my view, discoveries that has been done is that we can shape ourselves. We can help to shape our brains and our bodies. And this can be then translated into the next generation. And this is called epigenomics. And epigenomics is one of the fastest emerging scientific fields, and it's promising a huge potential both in healthcare and drug discovery. And this is an example. Here we have an experiment in which just by living with a low nurturing or a high nurturing mother, the genome of this pup can change, and this change will be transmitted to the progeny. And not only that, we can also target these pharmacologically. We can also change the impact of environment pharmacologically. So this is opening incredible opportunities for diagnosis and also for drug discovery, and the epigenomic therapeutic marker is expected to grow millionary in the next years. What is the problem? The problem is that we are lost in translation of these basic research findings into real advances in therapy. And what has been shown, and this is a paper that is addressing this problem, is that in fact the new compounds are only marginally better than the old ones, but much more expensive, increasing the gap that Professor Pogge was targeting. So from almost 1,000 new drugs, the clinicians were rating as making a real therapeutic advance only 2%. Okay? So this is a problem. this is a problem. And what happens? Why is that? Because most of the new drugs are simply repositioning drugs, because this is much less expensive. And the risk versus reward trade-off of the available drug developmental strategies is much better. So this is a problem. There is no translation of innovative aspects into the market. But let me end this presentation of science telling you why we are also worried. And we are also worried because pharma is not the ultimate answer. And in fact, we have to take into consideration the environment. The environment is strongly affecting how we develop and how we function. And this is an image in which you can see the lack of activation of very important brain areas in a child that was deprived in infancy. And this child, of course, suffers from emotional and cognitive problems. And there is an interplay between genetic susceptibility factors and the environment. So genetically susceptible individuals that are submitted to an adverse environment will suffer much more and will present, for example, in this case, antisocial behavior. And this is a matter of political decisions, because this implies that we need to boost education, we need to boost the environment, we need to change our way of targeting this environment, and this is something that can only be done through policymakers. So to finalize this part, I would like to say, to mention a phrase of Leonard Schlein, who said that there is no gene-controlled inheritable trait that cannot be altered by the environment, and humans enter the world as work in progress. So nature versus nurture is not an either-or duality, but rather represents an both-and type of complementarity. And this is an example from my lab in which you can see that the brain of this Down syndrome model is very much altered. And if we put this mouse in an enriched environment, we get a complete rescue of this brain alteration. So this gene-environment interaction is making people different. And we have to take this into account. So, given this complexity of the determinants of the phenotype, we really need to know more. We need more basic science. We need more knowledge. And unfortunately, as you know, the investment in science is not the best. And we have to really work on getting better on that. And we are fortunate to live in a region, in a country in which science is important. And this is something that has to be acknowledged. However, there is other problems. Thomas was pointing this focused innovation. And the problem is that the public agencies, and you simply have to look at the Horizon 2020 aims. The public funding is devoted to the diseases of the developed countries. So if you look at the health, demographic impact, and well-being in Horizon 2020, the main targets are aging and obesity. Okay? And the problem is that the map of some disorders, like malaria, for example, that was already pointed out, coincides with the map of poverty, but does not coincide with the map of R&D investment, which is exactly the opposite. Not only that, but also this map is the map of corruption. So even if we get the drugs there, it is not for granted that they will arrive to the people. And this is something that we have to take into account and also address. So not to impunity has to be taken with strength by the citizens and the governments. And this is a big problem, and it's also affecting our map. So we also have our map in which poverty is increasing, the risk of exclusion is increasing, it's affecting the families, it's coming from different problems of the crisis, and the shame is that it is mainly affecting the young population, as you can see in the second line. And this is really sad, because this young population is the future. Is it hopeless? Well, to some extent. Professor Pogge was appealing to the ethical values, to morality, but what we know from neuroscience is that the higher the power is, the more probable are the unethical attitudes. And this is a problem. These are some of the studies that have been done showing how increased wealthy economies drive more unethical behaviors. You'd say, you may argue, okay, you can use your rights. This is a democracy. But from neuroscience, we also know that there is no rational voter. This is a myth. Why? Because the political brain is an emotional brain. And we are driven by emotions. So you know that marketing is used in politics as a technique to hold the voters, the traditional voters, and to widen their appeal. So probably what we should do, and this is being done from neuroscience and from science in general, is to take into account the voters' attitudes to design our campaigns. So let's ask, how is the voters' electoral memory, responsibility, and emotions associated with the votes? How they evaluate governmental performance when they vote? What is the impact of electoral arrangements on voting? And probably what we should do is also to have an observatory of political behavior, helping us to drive more coherent systems. So to finalize, let me wrap up a little bit what we have said. We are talking about the health system, and of course, I completely agree with Professor Pogge that the present system does very poorly in regard to cost effectiveness, but the problem is that this is reducing its societal value. In my point of view, we have to address not only how the investment in innovation is driven, but how innovation is done. So I would like to see more basic science addressing the questions and a change in the regulatory environment that can help the social value to rise again. So the idea, I completely agree, is that we should include the outcome of the treatment in the value of this treatment, so in the payback of this treatment. We should improve the participation of science. And it's sad to hear in Spain, fortunately not in Catalonia, that it's not time to invest in science because there are other necessities. I think that it's the other way around. I completely disagree. We have to invest in science to fill up these necessities. This is the only way. And finally, I propose that the application of the academic knowledge, both theoretical and methodologically, is done to policy making. And I think that I'd like to finalize with a sentence of Gareth Kane that says that the true barrier to innovation is about 6 inches wide, the space between our ears. And here inside are most of the problems and the solutions that can be found. Thank you very much.
So we are ready to start the debate. We have several questions here. I'll try to organize them a little bit. Some of the questions are directed to one of the speakers, some of the questions are directed to the other speaker, some are to both. But in any case, I'll direct the questions, and then in order to have a real debate, the other speaker should feel free to just intervene, right?
Thank you.
Okay, here I have a question. There are several questions that are very similar for Professor Pogge. So let me just pick one. This one says, it's anonymous actually, but it says, to support feasibility and the viability of the HIF-based system, we should need to measure performance. Are there any successful role models? Can you tell us more about how the performance is being measured?
Yes, of course. So there are two questions here. One is, what is the metric in terms of which we measure performance? And the second is, how do we apply that metric in the real world? How do we get the needed empirical data? The metric, we want to be basically boring. We want to take over health measurements that already exist and have been developed, for example, by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation in Seattle. And they use a method that is based on quality-adjusted life years. So one quality-adjusted life year is 1 year in good health. And if you add a year of good health to a patient, you have achieved 1 QALY. If you lengthen a person's life by 2 years, but in poor health, that would also be 1 QALY. Or if you don't lengthen a person's life, but simply improve its quality, for example, from 0.5 to 1.0 for 2 years, that would also be 1 QALY. So data about both morbidity and mortality get combined into a single measure. Now, how would we do it empirically? Obviously, we could not follow each patient who takes a particular medicine. That would be much too expensive. But we could use random sampling. So just like you have exit polls after elections where you ask people, how did you vote? And when you ask 2,000 people, you can predict how the entire city of Barcelona has voted. And similarly, you can do it by following up randomly selected patients. You can select them by embedding microchips into randomly selected packages of drugs, or you can select them by geographical area, and then you look carefully by interviewing the patient and the doctor at the success of the treatment, and then extrapolate from there how well the drug has been doing in general.
If I may add something to that, I think that this is very important, and I think that it's very important that we start including already in the clinical trials measurements of quality of life. Many clinical trials do not incorporate in their design good measures of quality of life. And that I think that at the end of the day, it's not that you simply restore one condition, it's also that the life of this patient gets better. The problem that I see in all this field is also that in many cases the diagnoses are very difficult. There is a huge variability across patients, and this can to some extent bias also the results of the evaluations.
Okay. Here is a question that is actually for both of you, so perhaps we'll let Professor Dierssen start. It says, let me see if I can read it. It says, with the existing childbirth rates, greater life expectancy, lower infant mortality can make life more complex for less developed countries. Can this be the case? How should we tackle this challenge?
So it was longevity, the question. Of course, the improvements in the health system and the quality of life are impacting in our longevity. The problem that I see is not only in the less developed countries. I see the problem in our society, because we have prolongated the life of people without taking care of what is their role in our society and what is the way of managing this in the most productive way for everybody. And my point of view is that, in fact, we should take into account that not because somebody has more years, which has no merit, by the way, he's less valuable, or he has not the right to belong to a family or to a society. Of course, there are some disorders that are very difficult to manage, and they will need, for sure, help from the outside. But I think that we should reconsider our societal model, making it more inclusive, not only for the older, but also for the people that are different.
Do you want to add something, Professor Pogge? All right, then here's a question for Professor Pogge, also from Agustin Ruiz, I think, from Fundació ACE. So who will pay the bill for highly expensive Phase 3 CTS is assuming an HIF model? The question of the viability of the model.
So the clinical trials are expensive, as you say, and they will be paid as now by the innovator. So the innovator will, after the product is successful, and only if the product is successful, receive market clearance, will be allowed to sell the drug on the market, and the health impact rewards that the innovator reaps during the first 10 years that the drug is on the market will reimburse the innovator for the expenses of the clinical trials. So if, as I had outlined, there will be $6 billion on the fund each year, $6 billion in reward money, and if you have something like, let's say, 20 drugs being on the fund simultaneously, with about 2 drugs coming onto the fund each year and 2 drugs falling off the fund each year, that means that the average drug will earn about $200 million annually from the Health Impact Fund, and over 10 years that would be $2 billion or $3 billion over the whole period. And that reward money for the medicine will then pay retroactively for the clinical trials. That is economically quite similar to the present system, where again the innovator pays for the clinical trials in the hope that the medicine will be admitted onto the market and will then make back that money and a profit during the period that the medicine can be sold at patent-protected high prices.
And, okay. Here we have one for Professor Dierssen. You are a researcher in a leading center, and how would, in your opinion, a world based in the Health Impact Fund, the idea of the Health Impact Fund, on the current state-of-the-art frontier research, how would you think that the world would be?
I think that, of course, it's not a direct impact, but I think that by boosting innovative drugs and by letting the science come into it, the model that Professor Pogge is proposing is really very good, because it could boost back also science, basic science. I don't think that this model should impair basic science. The other way around. If we manage to really participate in a different way with drug discovery, this model can be extremely good for us also, for boosting the innovation from the point of view of the academia.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So the main thing here is, I think, that we have very different amounts of effort expended into different diseases today. With diseases like cancer and diabetes, we have spent enormous amounts of money researching these diseases because they are diseases of the affluent. With regard to the diseases of the poor, which do far more damage even than these very common diseases, we have not done a lot of research, and we could, at relatively low cost, improve greatly the arsenal of medical interventions available for those diseases. So I think that what the Health Impact Fund would also do, it would certainly incentivize more research, but it would also rechannel some research into these very low-hanging fruit, into these very easy-to-achieve innovations that are of such crucial importance to poor populations.
Okay, here we have another question for Professor Pogge from Parvati Nair from the United Nations University in Barcelona. Says, given that poverty is clearly linked to ill health, how does the Health Impact Fund address the underlying problem of structures that place the profit of pharmaceutical industries over their ethical or social obligations?
It doesn't really address that problem in the sense that it makes pharmaceutical companies morally motivated. So the Health Impact Fund is in that regard quite modest and says that the real problem, or the problem of mischanneled innovation, can be solved even while pharmaceutical companies remain focused on profits. So the real problem that I'm trying to solve with the Health Impact Fund is the problem that the rules that we have placed the pharmaceutical companies under are rules that systematically cause their immoral behavior. What we are saying to pharmaceutical companies is there's one way and one way only for you to make money, and that is by marking up the price of your product and gaining that difference between the price at which you sell and the cost at which you produce. That is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for the pharmaceutical companies to raise the price so high that they get a very large increase, a very large profit or markup, even if that means that the majority of human beings are excluded from the benefit of the drug. So I see the fault primarily with us, with the politicians, for misregulating the pharmaceutical industry. And I think if we change the rules under which they operate, their profit motive will not make them rush headlong against what is morally required. So I agree that the pharmaceutical industry has not been acting morally in disregarding the health problems of the developing countries. But I think that we don't need to convert them into good moralists in order to change their behavior. We have to change the incentives under which they operate and reward them on the basis of health impact rather than rewarding them by patent-protected markups. And that would also be good for us, as I've emphasized, because we want, for our own health care, our pharmaceutical companies to be rewarded according to how well they improve our health, and not on the basis of how effectively they market their drugs among doctors and patients.
I think that this question is very important because it addresses a very important aspect in general. So misregulation can drive misconduct. And this is not only true in pharmaceutical industry, it's also true for many other aspects. For example, in research, we have heard several cases of scientific misconduct driven by the model of evaluating science and driven by the way we mark up some science as excellence without boosting excellence in science from bottom up. So I think that the way we regulate not only pharmaceutical industry but many other aspects has to be reconsidered to some extent.
Okay. All right. As you can see, there are many questions, and we're just going to be able to cover just a few more because we just have 5 minutes or no more. This question comes from Emilia Pola, and it's actually a question for both of you. It says, will the Health Impact Fund provide enough incentive to cover the costs of development and approval?
Yeah, so this is actually something that is assured by the way the Health Impact Fund is constructed. So the Health Impact Fund has a constant amount of money each year. Let's say it's $6 billion. It could be more. And that money gets divided among the registered products. Now, if at any time the innovators find that the money per product is too little for them to undertake the effort of research and development, then innovators will no longer register products, and that means that the money in the pool will be divided among a smaller number of innovators, which in turn means that the rate of reward in dollars per quality adjusted life year will go up. So the reward rate on the Health Impact Fund is self-adjusting. We are not determining that rate. We are not saying you get so many dollars per quali, but how many dollars per quali you get depends on how many products will be competing with you for this reward money. So that way it's assured that there will always be a sufficiently large reward. Because if the reward is ever less than sufficient, innovators will not register their product, smaller number of products will be on the fund, and the reward for each product will rise to the level where it is attractive. Conversely, there will also never be huge windfall products for pharmaceutical companies, because once the Health Impact Fund affords these very large profits, then of course additional innovators will register their products and will drive the reward rate down. The Health Impact Fund is a kind of artificial market where the rate of reward is determined by the demand and supply of innovation.
Have an opinion about this? Should we go ahead?
Yeah.
All right. This is a question for Mara, for Professor Dierssen. Sorry, I can't read the name of the person, Maya Gorgieva. Is it reasonable to believe that the personalized medical treatment would be sustained by the public health organisms? Wouldn't it be too expensive? I think it's a question for...
Probably what should be done is think about it in a different way. So we already have a lot of information that is not being used, and that simply needs more knowledge to be addressed. So let's start doing this, and then probably we can build on this model. And, you know, to some extent, the old clinicians were already doing this, and were already using environmental medicine. So they were kind of customizing treatments depending on the response. Here we have the advantage that we can to some extent, anticipate these problems. And the only problem that we have is how to apply it. But I don't think that it would be extremely difficult to get this into the clinical practice.
So one thing we have observed in the history is how the prices for revolutionary medical treatments have fallen very dramatically in many cases. So what initially began as very, very expensive treatments that only very, very few people could afford have then over time become very cheap treatments that we could make available to everyone. The Health Impact Fund would actually make these treatments available to everyone, and this is, I think, entirely appropriate given, on the one hand, how cheap the marginal cost of these treatments becomes, and on the other hand, given how very important these treatments can be for the health and well-being of human beings.
Okay, so let's let me see this question. What incentives does the Health Impact Fund offer to shift innovation from personalized medicine to population and poverty-oriented drugs? How can basic research be involved in catalyzing that shift?
Yeah, so I would not actually characterize it as a shift away from personalized medicine. I think that revolution is there, and it's a good revolution that we should support. But the Health Impact Fund will add to the existing efforts, right? We now have efforts in healthcare that would be very cost effective in terms of achieving very large health gains at very low financial cost that we are simply not undertaking. We are not vigorously fighting the diseases of the poor, and we should be fighting these diseases. It would be a very, very cost effective way of improving the lives of poor people and also of overcoming poverty, because it's not only the case that poverty causes disease, but it's also the case that disease in turn reinforces poverty. So the Health Impact Fund is best understood not as a rechanneling of healthcare resources, but as opening up an additional stream of healthcare resources devoted specifically to the diseases that are very large and costly among the poor, costly in human terms, and that can be fought in what in economic terms are very low cost.
So I would add to that also the neglected diseases or the rare diseases have extremely hard times to get treated. And my suggestion is that the Health Impact Fund is also targeting or addressing this problem. And I think it could be addressed, for example, for personalized medicine by having the same kind of approach for the biotechs that are developing the genotyping and the epigenome research. So all these things are also in the same kind of model, of economic model. And this could also be addressed as you are proposing for agriculture. And I think that research could be really boosted by also devoting part of this income to basic research, to academy.
Okay. Something else? Well, as you can see, I'm completely flooded with questions here. There's no way we can go through all of them, and it's time, I'm afraid, to close this very fruitful debate, which could go for a very long time. So before the official closing of this event, let me say that the video will soon be posted in the Barcelona Knowledge Hub webpage, and that the talks and the debate will be transcribed, and then they will be published by the journal Contributions to Science, which is published by the Institut d'Estudis Catalans. Let me also say that I'm very grateful to the sponsors of the Barcelona Knowledge Hub, and very especially tonight to our gracious hosts this evening, the Ajuntament de Barcelona. I just want to say one more thing. It was said before that tonight there would be no winner, and I think that perhaps I would like to slightly correct that, because I think that tonight we're all winners, and for that we need to thank Professor Dierssen and Professor Pogge. Let's give them a round of applause. The closing of the event, first I will pass the microphone to Professor Anne Batimer. She's the Vice President of the Academia Europea.
Thank you. This has been an absolutely marvelous experience. I came here thinking that I was going to get a lecture and a discussion on medicine, a subject on which I'm fairly ignorant, and I got a beautiful lesson on world geography. It was absolutely splendid. What you've done with this event is to revive a medieval practice which was intellectually exciting at the time, telling people to think critically of their own situations, past and future. And that's what exactly you've done tonight, you two. Congratulations on a wonderful performance. The Academy of Europe has tried, I mean, we're young, relatively young, even though our members are rather elderly. We try to bridge the worlds of science and society, you know, bridging the analytical and the practical, you know, past and present and future. And this event teaches us in the academia what could be done in various places. So thank you again for this. We work in sections, different disciplines of germane style, combine in sections. But one event that happens every year is an annual conference. And we're very happy to tell you, or to remind some of you, that the annual conference of 2014 will happen in Barcelona, at our Barcelona hub. And it will address young Europe, realities and challenges. And I'm sure that many of the ideas that were expressed this evening will be expressed there. You know, the medical, the social, the environmental. So I hope that you'll put the dates. The dates are July 16 to 18, yes?
That's correct.
2014. So put the dates in your calendar. And I really look forward to meeting you again. This marvelous setting reminds me of what happened in medieval times to bring the Renaissance about. The Renaissance, which was an intellectual revolution, and it happened through disputatio of this kind. So thank you all so much for your inspiration.
Professor Mascolell?
So I think it's my turn to do also an official closing. Let me thank everybody, the mayor, the city, the president, the vice president of the academy, all the people of the academy here, and especially the speaker. This has been an exciting event. I don't know if it has been a disputatio or a concordatio, but certainly it has been exciting. As it has been pointed out, here there are no winners and no losers. And I think that's very good. I was thinking for at least 3 reasons. One is really would be very difficult, although Genoveva, to whom I also thank, she's the designer of all this, has solved very well the problem, but making both the winners, anyhow, it would be very difficult. The second reason is I save 300 gold coins. This is what the winner won in the Middle Ages, although with 2 winners it's not clear if it's and the third is there will not be a winner's course in the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, the winner ended up in exile 4 years later, but then he became the founder of the second oldest synagogue in the world, the Rambam synagogue in Jerusalem, so it was a successful exile. But fortunately, even if too recently, times have changed. So thank you very much.
Well, as Genoveva Martí said, it's true, there is no winner in this disputatio, and the debate could go on for a while more. In fact, I am sure it will continue in other areas. The idea that someone is in possession of the absolute truth is not old-fashioned. Other concepts have been gaining ground as dialogue, tolerance, and understanding. The result of this is a change of mentality. Today's society is more complex and more diverse, but at the same time richer. In response to these changes, it is very important to invest in knowledge. It is what the Academia Europea does since 1988, with events such as this and many others that organizes every year. It is excellent news that the Academia Europea has an office in Barcelona, concretely at the Institute for Catalan Studies, a century-old institution that promotes, develops knowledge and scientific research in Catalan language. It hosts other initiatives of leading institutions linked to research and culture. So I am very proud that the Institute for Catalan Studies hosts the Barcelona Knowledge Hub. I am sure that the Barcelona Knowledge Hub will contribute decisively to project Barcelona worldwide as a city of culture, knowledge, creativity, innovation, and well-being. In Barcelona, we are convinced that knowledge is one of the best tools we have to face the future with confidence. In Catalonia, research is done by universities, but also by companies, and often they work together. Research in areas as diverse as new technologies, biomedicine, energy, nanotechnology, optics, new materials, and also in humanities and the social science. This is an asset for the future, which we cannot forget. We must therefore continue to promote knowledge. I encourage you to do so with enthusiasm. We need enthusiasm. And nothing more. Enjoy the city. This evening there is the shopping night. Enjoy it.
Fotos ara? Digue'm. Fotos? No sé. No ho sé. Potser ho sap.
No sé aquest.